Hey, welcome back to Trek on the Tube. It's time for another Star Trek review and Easter eggs video. Today we're talking about Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode, 8, I Excretus. Now before we begin, I would like to specify that although I found this to be the weakest episode of the season so far, I still did have fun, and in no way do I consider it a bad episode, or even a mediocre one. Frankly, it's fine, which I think says a lot about the show in general, how the quote-unquote weakest episodes, in my opinion, are still fine. Anyway, yeah, it's the one that I like the least this season, but not everyone seems to agree. That's right, it's not a universal opinion. On the contrary, I've seen plenty say that it's their favorite, which actually makes this episode quite noteworthy. I mean, think about it. This is probably the first truly divisive episode of Lower Decks so far. Veritas, I didn't like. Mugato, Gumato, I adored. Others disagreed on both accounts, but I feel like I wasn't necessarily in the majority in those instances, whereas here, there seems to be no majority at all. But I digress. Enough about how my thoughts compare to others. What are my thoughts exactly? Well, basically, the episode presented to us a very creative and innovative use of the famous Star Trek holodeck technology, and then set up a premise that could have not only permitted the deeper exploration of our beloved characters' backstories and arcs, while also delivering its own take on the short story format adopted by The Simpsons or Rick and Morty with their respective Halloween of Horror or Interdimensional Cable series, but sadly what we got was more of a mishmash of references to previous iterations of Star Trek with an excuse of a plot thread holding it together. I mean, was it good fun? Yeah. Does every single episode have to have some sort of deeper meaning or moral or lesson? Or does every episode have to advance the plot somehow, like the overarching plot? No, absolutely not. It's fine to just do an episode that's fun now and then, and that's what it was. It was fun. It's just that I Excretus, title included, lacked a little finesse. A lot of the jokes didn't land as well as they could have. A lot of the Easter eggs were very in-your-face and quite frankly served no other purpose than being Easter eggs. Sadly, yet again, Freeman ends up being ridiculed on at least 2 occasions for the sake of moving the plot forward or making a joke. Honestly, my biggest positive takeaway from the whole thing is that Mariner and Boimler make a great team. I know that the episode had a Mariner and Freeman moment, and it was nice. It's always nice to see them smile and actually work together, but it's the combination of Boimler being so anally Boimler, pun intended, and Mariner being clever and confrontational that ultimately saved the day. When it comes to the individual stories, the drills, the tests, they were fun, even if I feel like for the first time ever, some of them could potentially alienate viewers that haven't seen that much Star Trek. Like, usually Lower Decks manages to make its jokes work on multiple levels, so that people that don't understand the full context of what's being said or shown can still have a laugh. Here, that wasn't necessarily the case, although perhaps alienate is a bit too strong a word, but you get the point. Okay, alright, okay. It has now come the time to address the naked time, the naked now, the naked boims situation, because yeah, this thing has become quite something online. It's become quite a thing on the internet recently. Some people are using it as the end-all argument against Lower Decks and modern Star Trek in general, saying that this is why it sucks. Others say that on the contrary, it aligns perfectly with Gene Roddenberry's vision. He was a perverted creep. Okay, maybe people didn't say exactly those things, although it wouldn't surprise me. The fact remains, Trekkies have yet again found another thing to debate about and fight about, but there is also a very interesting conversation taking place about sex positivity and the general attitude Star Trek and Lower Decks have towards sex and sexuality. So it's not all fistfights and condescending Twitter messages. There is something to be said. Admittedly, I may not be the most sex-friendly viewer, in the sense that I'm not one to need or ask for sex scenes in the movies or TV shows that I watch, and sometimes when I get attached to characters, I come to find sex scenes kind of awkward to watch. Almost like watching your friends do it. But that's off topic. There was no actual sex happening here. It was just full-blown nudity. And here's the thing. Even if I don't think that the whole sequence was too distant from what Star Trek has already given us in the past. I mean, clearly, they jacked the idea of everyone being naked straight from the Next Generation. I am inclined to say that there were a couple of shots that weren't necessary. Boimler and his black box, Ransom and his colleague. I know, the scenes were very brief and the jokes were very effective for many, and come on, I mean, this kind of content is perfect for Twitter jokes and just general internet shenanigans. I'm having a lot of fun with it. But in my opinion, they took the joke and the show to an extreme that wasn't, as I said, necessary. Taking out those two scenes wouldn't have been a loss for the episode, on the contrary. The whole naked now / time sequence would have still had the effect the creatives were looking for. You can still use the scene to surprise without an added shock factor. When it comes to the more general nudity and the on-screen LGBT representation, that is completely different and I have no problem with it. And yes, I do agree that all those elements do contribute to a more sex-positive vision and depiction within the franchise, or the whole TV landscape, actually. So those are my thoughts on that. Clearly, I would have preferred the moment to be a little softer, but I do agree that it does all come down to, I guess, everyone's personal taste. It's a very subjective matter. No one can come in and say this is not what should have been done. Putting all that aside, though, the real, true issue is the complete lack of respect of individuals' rights and the breach of privacy displayed by the training programs themselves. Yes, all the various drills were rigged, but that doesn't change the fact that they still portrayed actual people from the real world naked or as villains, etc. It's all actually quite troubling, especially considering this has been addressed before in the franchise. Voyager did this kind of story with the Doctor and his holo novel. Barclay in the Next Generation was doing freaky shit with Troy, presumably. Like, I kind of don't like the way that the episode brushed over that, I guess. I now feel a little weird having spent most of my review talking about that one sequence in the episode where it really was just a short joke. It's a bit of a mishmash of an episode, and I don't really have that much to focus on, I guess. The story serves the purpose of giving us references. That's kind of all there is to it. And, yeah. Ultimately, though, I am willing to concede that this interdimensional cable-styled collage of classic Star Trek moments was fun. And it'll never be something I'll skip over when I'm doing my rewatches. But yeah, the lack of finesse from the plot itself to each individual moment, including the fact for some inexplicable reason higher ranking officers have access to better replicators, that was a letdown for me, a disappointment. The references could have been less ham-fisted, the humor could have had a touch more class, the conclusion could have led to more impactful character-defining moments than just, we like getting jerks fired. The pacing itself could have been less hectic and all over the place. So yeah, fun, but my least favorite of the season so far. And that all brings us to the end of my thoughts, the end of my opinions, but no, not the end of the video, because there are so many Easter eggs and references to go over. I'll be going over them in bullet point form once again due to like the sheer amount. So here we go. Engage. I Excretus. The title of the episode is probably a reference to the Next Generation episode I Borg. Boimler, in his drill, becomes Excretus of Borg. This is a reference to Picard being Locutus of Borg. Boimler even says, "They took everything I was," which is what Picard said after his experience. Also, in the Next Generation. Boimler's first score, by the way, is 79%, which cannot be coincidental. It has to be a reference to, the Borg in Voyager 7 of 9. The Borg Queen was a character first introduced in First Contact. She was later then seen in Voyager. Alex Krieg, who did the voice here, was the original actor from the movie. This whole scene, by the way, is a reference to what happens to Data in that very film. This satellite looks a lot like this space module seen in the Next Generation. This character is a Pandronian, yet another obscure one-time animated series species. Fun things to note about her: she sometimes refers to herself as this one, which is what this guy did in the animated series. Also, sometimes she has 5 fingers and sometimes 4, which is not an animation era on Lower Decks' part. It's simply a continuation of the animation era from the animated series. So they kind of canonized the varying finger numbers. It's fun. This list of training scenarios available included the Kobayashi Maru, a nod to the Wrath of Khan, Tribble Troubles, referring to tribbles that have become a big thing in all of Star Trek, From Q to Q, a reference to Q and the Q Continuum, also now a big thing in Star Trek, Cause and Effect, a Next Generation episode, Natural Selection, Chain of Command, Hero Worship, all also Next Generation episodes. Carbon-Based Units is a reference to dialogue from the motion picture. Whale Rescue is a reference to the voyage home. Escape the Void is probably a nod to that place called the Void we saw in Voyager, and the Tholian Web is an original series episode. Mariner is sent to the Mirror Universe in her first drill, a place we saw in the original series, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, and Discovery. While she's there, she hits Shax with one of Kirk's famous moves, the Double Fist. Remember, Ransom did that in Season 1. This holographic Mirror Shax, by the way, is not dressed the same as Rutherford's imaginary Mirror Shax previously seen in the season. Her second drill is an Old West type planet that looks exactly like this one from the original series. Her final drill is a reference to both the original series episode The Naked Time and the Next Generation episode The Naked Now, in which both crews are infected by a virus that makes them lose their inhibitions. In the original series, most crew members just go some kind of crazy, whereas in the Next Generation things get more erotic, or at least a little more nude, as you can see by all the naked bodies here. This Lower Decks episode evidently went down a more Next Generation route, although the writing on the wall is jacked directly from the original series. Tendy's drill is a fun take on the Next Generation episode where Worf is paralyzed. These red outfits are also seen in the Next Generation, worn by surgeons. Rutherford had to go through a Needs of the Many situation, directly jacked from the Wrath of Khan. All the sets and uniforms were faithfully recreated, as was the Enterprise refit. We've come to expect this level of quality from the Lower Decks. Ta'ana talks about standing around doing nothing in the transporter room before actually eventually transporting someone. This is most definitely a nod to the famous online webcomic O'Brien at Work. This guy is dressed like Robin Hood and mentions Q. The exact same scenario happened in the Next Generation. Q was involved in Robin Hood shenanigans. He then name drops the Jem'Hadar, which were a villain species in Deep Space Nine. This wormhole effect is from the motion picture. The crystalline entity is from the Next Generation. It was, from what I remember, there was only supposed to be one, but they imply that there's multiple crystalline entities going about their business in this episode. That's kind of scary. Anyway, the technique they used to escape it in Lower Decks, a graviton pulse, is the same that they used to kill it back in the Next Generation, or to kill at least the one from the Next Generation. This space dock was faithfully recreated from The Search for Spock. Oh, and this is yet another faithfully recreated set, the transporter hub and cockpit in The Runabout. Hot damn, was that a lot to talk about, and I'm sure I missed plenty. If you noticed Easter eggs that I didn't point out, please do leave a comment below pointing them out. That's about it for me. I'm sorry I didn't like the episode as much as maybe some of you guys did. Perhaps you agree with me. Whatever the case, like, subscribe, comment, share. What is it? Do all of those wonderful things. A big thanks to the channel patrons. And as usual, live long and prosper.